You're listening to a CUNY radio podcast of Newsmakers, a look at the people and places making headlines at the City University of New York.
This is CUNY Newsmakers. I'm Neil Rosenfeld. We're talking with Diana Reiss, a professor of psychology at Hunter College and the CUNY Graduate Center, where she is in the biopsychology and behavioral neuroscience program. Her field of interest is the intelligence of other species, and dolphins in particular. Welcome, Dr. Reiss. How did you become interested in the intelligence of other species?
Well, I was always interested in animals when I was a child, and when I decided to go into graduate school, I was fascinated particularly by dolphins because they were so different than we are. I mean, if we study primates, we can identify with much of their behavior, but with dolphins, you don't get much more different in body form and even in their brains. Their organization of their brains is different, and that really was compelling to me.
Well, just how intelligent are dolphins?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because for us humans who are trying to understand the intelligence of another animal, it's really hard, it's a challenge. And I think we can't really make fair comparisons between our kinds of intelligence and dolphin intelligence because we face very different problems. We have different environmental pressures, different social pressures. But if we look at dolphins and the way they've adapted and the way they've evolved in their environment, they're beautifully adapted and very intelligent, even by our standards. And I'd love to talk about that.
Please go ahead.
So what we do is we often look at animals and we give them similar kinds of tests that we may give ourselves, that we give children or adults. And one of those tests is a test called mirror self-recognition. For a long time we used to think that our ability to recognize ourselves in the mirror, to get up in the morning and walk into your bathroom mirror and see that face and know, that face is mine, and perhaps be really disappointed or happy when you see that, is a uniquely human attribute. We discovered many years ago that we're not alone in this capacity, that other species, our closest relatives, the great apes, can also recognize themselves in the mirror. This may seem trivial, but it's actually fairly complex. I did studies with my colleague, Dr. Laurie Marino from Emory University many years ago, showing dolphins, as different as they are, living in this very different environment, also have this very rare and high cognitive capacity.
I wanted to ask you, how do you know that a dolphin is recognizing itself in the mirror?
So the way we discover that dolphins are recognizing themselves in the mirror is through careful testing. First, we watch their behavior under normal circumstances and just describe or make what we call an ethogram or a catalog of their behaviors. What are they doing when they're not in front of a mirror? Then we put a non-reflective surface on a wall of the aquarium, and we look at when it's not a reflective surface, what do they do? And again, record their behaviors. This is all done on videotape, so we can go back carefully and watch. Then we expose them to a mirror, and we watch what happens when they're first exposed to a mirror, and then what they do is they continue to be in front of that mirror. What does their behavior look like? If we see behavior that looks like they understand it's themselves, we call it self-directed behavior, behavior directed at oneself. So if I'm looking at a mirror, I may look up close at my eye, I may open my mouth and look at the inside of my mouth, look at a part of my body I can't see. That's enough to say they have mirror self-recognition. But the classic test is called the mark test, and this was pioneered back in the 1980s by Gordon Gallup, who did the first studies with chimpanzees. And what this is you mark the animal with some kind of non-toxic mark that doesn't hurt them, and see will they go over to the mirror and react to themselves as if they understand it's themselves they're looking at. So in the case of dolphins, we marked them many times in different parts of their body that they couldn't see without the mirror. And they raced to the mirror, positioned that part of their body that was marked immediately in front of the mirror. And that was very clear evidence that they understood that it was themselves they were looking at, and that in fact they were using the mirror as a tool to view themselves.
I understand that you're involved in using computer keyboards in dolphins to test their intelligence. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Several years ago, this was actually a paper I published in the mid-90s, we actually provided dolphins with underwater keyboards. Now, this might seem very strange. Why would you give non-handed dolphins a keyboard? These were keyboards that had big keys on them, so the dolphins could actually use their beaks, the part that sticks out of their head, to push a key, and it was like a vending machine for dolphins. It gave them choice and control over getting things. And again, my approach is a little bit different perhaps than that of some others. I like to keep the dolphins well fed when I'm working with them, so they're not working because they're hungry. We give them toys to interact with all the time, and we try to keep them in really social environments. Then I presented them with this underwater keyboard and asked the question, well, what would they do if they had choice and control, if they could control us in a way? And what we found was quite remarkable. What we found was they used the keys actively. We recorded everything that they did. It was all, the keyboard was interfaced with a computer, an Apple computer, and we recorded everything on video. So we knew exactly when they were pressing the keys and who was pressing them. So they could ask for objects or activities. So one of our dolphins, Delphi, who was born in our facility, would use a ball key more than any other key. That was his preferred object. And when he hit a key, he would hear a whistle that the computer generated, and he would get one of many balls. It was like a vending machine. One of our other dolphins had other preferences, so they were showing that they used the keyboard to get what they preferred, but what was even more fascinating was what else they did that we didn't expect. Now, we've suspected that dolphins learn by imitation, just like children do. And very few animals learn their vocal signals, their communication, their language through imitation. Many animals have it more hardwired. But dolphins, songbirds, and children show these striking parallels in how they learn. So we had our dolphins, who were 11 months old when we started, with their moms in the pool. And these little guys, two males, would use this keyboard, and they started imitating the sounds they heard on the keyboard immediately. When I say immediately, really after about 19 times of hearing a sound. So not quite immediately, but they imitated it very quickly. So they would hear the sound after the computer made it, they'd get a ball, and you'd hear, and then we see them touching the ball and whistling the ball sound, playing with the ball, whistling the ball sound, coming back up to the keyboard, whistling the ball sound now, and hitting the right key, not the wrong keys, but the right keys. So they were very quick to learn the associations between the visual forms on the keyboard, the sounds, and the objects. That's intelligent behavior, and very strikingly similar to how we learn.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You were a science advisor to the film The Cove, which has been nominated for a 2010 Academy Award for Best Documentary. And I understand that you told the person who wound up directing the film about the harvest of dolphins in Japan. Could you tell us what happened there?
Yes, I've been working to try to stop a terrible and very inhumane killing of dolphins that goes on in Japan.